Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Dutit. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these screens behind me, folks. What you probably don't know is these are feeds from our stations and affiliates all across the country. If there's something happening out there, we're going to bring it to you right here on CBS News 24/7. Let's begin. The vice presidential candidates appear diametrically opposed on policies, but civil in nature. We'll recap the major takeaways from last night's one and only VP debate. Tensions coming to a head in the Middle East. Israel vows to retaliate after Iran launches its biggest missile attack ever. Plus, ripple effects from the port workers' strike are likely to hit all aspects of the U.S. economy. When you could feel the impact and where negotiations stand. This is CBS News 24/7. All right, you know we're going to begin here, right? This is the day after both the Harris and Trump campaigns. They're claiming victory. Would you expect anything less from last night's one and only vice presidential debate? And of course, you saw it right here on CBS for 90 minutes. Tim Walz and J.D. Vance squared off in a policy-focused debate. Here's just a small sample of what happened last night.
Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership.
Effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before.
I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years?
We have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies.
The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography?
My party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us.
Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
I want to bring in CBS News political director Fin Gomez for more on last night's debate. Fin, let's just have this conversation. First off, I want to begin with that last exchange. A lot of people are talking about, look, it was civil. I think Tony DeCoppel on CBS Mornings today said sort of two Midwestern dads sitting around having a conversation about policy differences while enjoying a beer. That's the vibe that it gave off. But there was that telling moment, that last soundbite that we played, where Senator Vance refused to answer a very simple question, which was, did Donald Trump win that last election? And we saw it again from Tom Cotton in the spin room, unable or unwilling to answer that question. What does that mean for people who are undecided?
I think for people that are undecided, which is, I think, part of this debate last night, Vlad, was really about trying to focus on those undecided, those persuadable voters in those key battleground states who might be able to go their way, right? We're only 34 days away from the election, from Election Day, and, you know, every little bit counts, especially in these key battleground states. I think with that, you saw some immediate reaction to the response that J.D. Vance gave in that exchange between him and Walz. And some of that reaction was criticism. Like, you saw that coming, that he could not answer that question. He did not want to say specifically. He deflected and moved on to a different topic, right? I think that could have an impact on those maybe moderate voters in like places like Pennsylvania, who are still deciding and who feel differently and very strongly about what occurred on January 6th.
So let's talk about immigration, which was, of course, a big topic of the debate last night. Senator Vance had some strong words on immigration policy. Let's play a bit of that.
We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction.
So Finn, you know, one of the things that I'm curious for your thoughts on Governor Walz, it felt as if there were moments for him to jump in and make a point when Senator Vance was saying something that was erroneous, and he often didn't. In that particular case, he could have said, look, President Biden actually reinstated some of the Trump-era policies as it relates to immigration. Also, this struggle with what to do about immigration, especially undocumented immigration, is one that all presidents over the last 15 or 20 years have struggled with. But Walz seemed to be, at least in the early stages of the debate, on unsure footing. What was your thought on that?
Yeah, especially because immigration is such a top issue for many voters. Yes, economy, yes, abortion rates, but also what you're hearing, especially from these Republican voters, is that immigration is a top issue. I do think that he did seem a little flat-footed on that response, on that answer, and where he could have been more aggressive. He could have gone after Vance on that issue, but it's something that I think he got a little bit of a shaky start when he specifically Governor Walz got a little bit of a shaky start, but I think he picked it up as it went forward and really ended with pretty strongly at the end of the debate there. But I think on immigration, that's something that Republicans believe, that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance believe, that if you're talking about that issue, that they can win on that issue.
Finn, before you go, let me just ask you one last question. The most telling poll that I saw this morning was that 88% of people CBS News polled said they actually appreciated a discussion that wasn't focused on excessive or inflammatory rhetoric. I mean, you and I, having covered the 2016 election and the 2020 election, what does that kind of tell you about how people today in 2024 are feeling about the last couple of years, this WWE style body politic that we've been engaging in? And people are just like, I just want to hear about the policies and what you do to make my life better without all the name calling.
Vlad, you're absolutely right. It was about substance. It was about policy. It was about nuance. It was about context. And I think, if you really have to go back to 2012, where you had like a similar vibe, Vlad. And I think there is this hunger. There's this hunger from voters who just want to know what you think. What you saw last night, there were some divergent issues, pretty strong ones, two different party platforms, of course, but they wanted to hear what these candidates had to say about their platforms. And I think, again, with such a tight race, those undecideds, those people on the bubble, maybe with this substance that they heard last night, it would help them better to identify who they're going to vote for and how they vote.
All right, Finn Gomez, your title, political director.
That's right.
How do you look so good this morning, having probably not slept in the last 48 hours, brother?
I haven't slept at all.
I know, man, but you look good. That's all that matters. You look good and you sound good. Appreciate you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, dude. All right, viewers of the debate seem to think it was an even match between the two vice presidential candidates. There's some new CBS polling that says 42% of debate watchers think J.D. Vance won, while 41% thought Tim Walz won. So let's get to CBS News national correspondent Sharika Duncan, who watched the debate in the key battleground city of Grand Rapids, Michigan, alongside voters with a wide range of views. Sharika, I was following you all last night and even this morning on CBS Mornings. Probably the first question that I have for you is, what was the most interesting thing you heard from those voters yesterday, either ones supporting Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or an undecided? What was the most telling? If you had to go home tonight and tell your daughter, man, you know what I heard that was really interesting? This was this.
That's a great question, Vlad, and I will be telling Journey what I thought about this debate. Honestly, what really stood out to me was civility. I think that the people that I was sitting with, they were expecting for there to be a little bit more combative discourse, if you will, but in fact, we saw a number of times both candidates saying, I actually agree with you, and I think I agree with you too. I just don't agree with the person at the top of your ticket. So that definitely was the first thing that stands out. And then, of course, there's a separation on immigration policies, the economy, gun violence, and things of that nature. And by the way, those were the things that ranked high for the voters that we spoke to. Something else, as I'm watching the panel and looking for any gestures or nodding of the head, is they were really paying attention when both candidates mentioned Amber Thurman. Now, Amber Thurman, as you know, Vlad, was mentioned last month in that ProPublica article as a possible preventable death. Amber Thurman lived in Georgia. She traveled to North Carolina back in 2022 to have a surgical abortion. She was late to the appointment, according to ProPublica, and they offered her 2 pills to take. She later died from complications after taking those pills that were supposed to induce an abortion. But the question ProPublica was posing is 20 hours that went by that the doctors waited to do an operation that would have removed the remaining fetus. And there being questions about the lengths that women in this country are going to and whether or not that does impact them when it comes to complications, and in the case of Amber Thurman, her death. Now, no one has spoken to the doctors involved in Amber Thurman's care, so that's important to note. But I think they were listening intently, and when I asked them, are you all familiar with that story, 3 out of the 6 raised their hand, and they all really talked about their views, whether it is pro-life or pro-choice, and them agreeing by and large that they felt like this was something that still needed to be worked out since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, but also even the people that identify as Republicans and people that are with Trump and Vance said that they believed that it should be a woman's right. So I saw that issue, we had a lot of back and forth and exchange about that, but I think that name that we first heard in that Oprah interview with Kamala Harris and the family being there, and then now to hear 2 of the vice presidential candidates bring up that name, it is something that people are paying attention to. And we actually spoke to the family of Amber Thurman last week. You'll hear more of that interview later on another broadcast. But it was very low-key. It was civil. I feel like it set the tone for the discussion that I had then with those 6 voters. They were able to disagree and agree, and everyone walked away shaking hands and thinking, you know what, this wasn't so bad. And it's nice to see.
It was.
And I time these days, as you know, Vlad.
100%. And I like the guy at the end of the piece that you filed this morning for CBS Mornings, the one dude who was just sort of very adamant about the stakes in this election, right? He was sort of like, that's the whole thing. This is what this is about. I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, and it's fun. And what's the best part about those conversations, Vlad? Is that, we're really not there as fact checkers when we're moderating these panels. This is an opportunity for people to express how they feel and for other people to see or try to understand where people are coming from on these different issues. And might I add, I know you said Finn looked great. Vlad, you look great too. I know you're not getting a lot of sleep these days.
All right, well, what can I say? Thank you, friend.
Always good to see you.
We'll talk to you later. All right, let's dig into some international news now. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to retaliate after Iran launched its largest missile attack on his country last night, stoking fears of a wider regional war as Israeli forces continue their operations against Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. Israel's military says it was able to intercept many of Iran's missiles, and U.S. forces in the region also took some of them out. Our Chris Livesay has more from Tel Aviv.
But some of those missiles did get through, like the one that smashed this car in a residential area outside of Tel Aviv. Among the roughly 180 ballistic missiles Israel says Iran fired at Israel overnight, lighting up the night sky with incandescent debris, as many of those missiles were intercepted by Israel's defenses. We saw missiles flying over places like the Western Wall in Jerusalem, and of course here in Tel Aviv, Israel's biggest city. Iran was jubilant. There were images of people there celebrating this attack from Iran on Israel. And there were some people who were injured here. In fact, one person at least we know was killed in these attacks. All of this comes amid a widening war in Israel at its northern border with Lebanon as it goes after Hezbollah, which has been wreaking havoc across northern Israeli towns for the past 11 months, displacing roughly 70,000 people. The Israeli military announced earlier this week it was launching a limited offensive across the border with Lebanon and showed pictures of them destroying tunnels and destroying weapons they say they found inside of these tunnels. It's a level of intensity and fighting we haven't seen in this part of Lebanon since the last time Israel fought a full-blown ground invasion against Hezbollah in 2006. Chris Livesay, CBS News, outside Tel Aviv.
All right, on that subject, let's take you live right now to the United Nations, where the Secretary General is addressing the Iranian attack on Israel. Let's step in and listen.
General, the suffering endured by the Palestinian people in Gaza is beyond imagination. At the same time, the situation in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, continues to deteriorate with Israeli military operations, construction of settlements, evictions, land grabs, and intensification of settler attacks, progressively undermining any possibility of a two-state solution. And simultaneously, armed Palestinian groups have also used violence. Hamas has continued to launch rockets, and just yesterday, 7 Israelis were killed in a terror attack in Jaffa. Madam President, the events of the past week, the past months, and indeed nearly the past year make it clear. It's high time for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, with the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, the effective delivery of humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza, and irreversible progress to a two-state solution. It's high time for a cessation of hostilities in Lebanon, re-election towards full implementation of Security Council resolutions 1559 and 1701, paving the way for diplomatic efforts for sustainable peace. It's high time to stop the sickening cycle of escalation after escalation that is leading the people of the Middle East straight over the cliff. Each escalation has served as a pretext for the next. We must never lose sight of the tremendous toll this is.
All right, you've been listening to the United Nations Secretary General addressing the ongoing tension, the ongoing wars that are happening in the Middle East. We're going to continue to listen in on the Secretary General and bring you updates throughout the day. For more on the U.S. response to the situation in the Middle East, let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. All right, Willie James, what are you hearing from the White House about possible Israeli response to this Iranian missile attack, and more importantly, diplomatic efforts?
Hey there, Vlad. Good to be with you. Well, President Biden addressed the situation following that attack yesterday. We did hear from him where he said that the U.S. remains fully supportive of Israel. This comes after nearly 200 missiles, as we saw on our screens, as you just mentioned in that live report with Chris Livesay. There's nearly 200 missiles on their way towards Israel, some of them making it through. Now, the United States does have assets in the region, and some of those assets were involved in shooting some of these projectiles down. But President Biden was asked about what comes next and how the U.S. will respond during a meeting where he convened his cabinet to talk about the storm damage with Helene. Listen to what he said.
That's an active discussion right now. We've got to get all the data straight. We've been in constant contact with the Israeli government and our counterparts, and that remains to be seen.
Now, U.S. officials have been in touch with their Israeli counterparts to talk about next steps. I'll also note that the Prime Minister sent a message to Iran saying essentially that Israel will respond and that Iran is essentially making a mistake here with that attack.
All right, Willie James Inman for us at the White House. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. New York City Mayor Eric Adams returns to federal court this hour for bribery and fraud criminal charges. We'll tell you what to expect from today's hearing. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. President Biden is traveling to the Carolinas today to survey the trail of destruction Hurricane Helene left behind. The National Guard has been called in to assist in the search and recovery efforts for survivors. CBS News witnessed rescues by guardsmen in the towns of Burnsville and Hendersonville, North Carolina. However, some of those missions turned into recovery. Helene is one of the deadliest hurricanes to hit the continental United States, claiming more than 160 lives. We'll go to Asheville, North Carolina, one of the hardest hit towns just ahead. Okay, let's talk about the U.S. dock workers that are on strike now for a second day in a row. And the union representing about 25,000 workers, well, they've rejected the latest proposal. And so that means imports and exports at major shipping ports in the Southeast are at a standstill. CBS News correspondent Nancy Chen is following all this for us and joins me now to talk about it. So, Nancy, let's first break down what this contract proposal was and why was it shut down?
Vlad, good morning to you. The employer group representing terminal operators and ocean carriers, USMX, said that their most current offer includes a nearly 50% wage increase and keeping their current policy on automation and semi-automation. However, dock workers, they say this right now is a defining time for automation and their industry as a whole.
We're looking ahead into the future. Going to work now at the risk of losing our jobs 5 or 10 years down the road is very short-sighted. So that's why we're here.
That and pay are the main sticking points here among many workers in this union on the East and Gulf Coast. They make between $20 and $39 an hour, and that is significantly less than their peers on the West Coast, Vlad.
All right, so clearly with the understanding that the union workers want better pay and they want certain things like automation sort of sussed out before they will sign this deal. But let's talk about what this is going to mean for folks at home. You know me, Nancy. I'm a big Amazon buyer. I mean, I'm always texting you when I go to Trader Joe's. And if they don't have my kimbap there, like, I'm going to be annoyed. So I'm going to want that kimbap in the frozen food section of my Trader Joe's. How am I going to be feeling in a week's time?
Yeah, and we do a pretty good deal on that group chat on the kimbap. You know, for the kimbap specifically, I'm not quite sure. But when we talk about imports and exports to the East and Gulf Coast as a whole, this could have a major impact, and it already is. By one estimate, the strike's economic impact could cost up to $5 billion a day. And for every day that these ports are shut down, it will take roughly 6 to clear the backlog that then is subsequently built up. And to give you an idea of how widespread this is, these ports handle about 80% of the country's coffee, tea, spirit, and beverage imports, as well as about 60% of medical and surgical instruments coming into the United States. Also halted right now, about 76% of vehicle exports. So you're really going to start to see that ripple effect throughout so many aspects of the economy. That said, from a consumer standpoint, you and me, that stuff is not quite as noticeable just yet. A lot of the companies that we've been talking to and retailers as a whole have been preparing for this strike for months. They had an idea that this might happen, so they've been front-loading their imports and say, at least especially for the holiday season, that they are in good shape. However, one aspect that you are going to want to keep an eye out on is produce, because there is that significantly shorter shelf life right there. And because of that, they will likely be among the first to go up in cost. Vlad, one thing especially to maybe look at, bananas, because so many of them are imported and they have a very short shelf life.
That is true. Heavens knows we don't need another hit to the U.S. economy, so I hope they work this out. But in the case that they don't, Nancy, I know you hoard the kimbap over at your place, so that's where I'm going to come and get my fix. And certainly Celine is going to need her bananas, too.
Bring the family.
So just bring it. Just be ready. I'll talk to you later, Nancy. Thank you very much. All right, let's talk about New York City Mayor Eric Adams. He's actually due in court this hour. He's, of course, facing federal bribery and conspiracy charges. Today, the judge could outline a preliminary timeline for the trial. CBS News national correspondent Nikki Batiste has the very latest on that. Nikki, good morning.
Good morning. Mayor Eric Adams is expected to appear in this courthouse for a hearing today. Among the allegations by federal prosecutors is that Adams accepted more than $100,000 in free airfare, upgrades, and luxury hotels from Turkish government officials and businessmen in exchange for favors. Perhaps the most troubling favor that is alleged is that Adams was involved in pressuring the New York Fire Department to allow the building of a Turkish building in Manhattan that had already been deemed unsafe. Adams' lawyers have already filed a motion to dismiss one of the charges against him for bribery and says he will file motions in coming weeks for the rest of the charges. Adams has faced many calls to resign. He has been adamant that he has no plans to do so. He's been speaking in the days since his arraignment, saying, "I am innocent. I am innocent." The only person with the power to remove Adams from office is New York Governor Kathy Hochul. If Adams were to be convicted, he could face up to 45 years in prison. One of the outcomes from this hearing today could potentially be a trial date. Vlad?
All right, Nikki, thank you very much. A doctor charged in connection with Friends star Matthew Perry's death is expected to plead guilty in a federal court. What we know about the agreement made with prosecutors. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you. A San Diego-based doctor is expected to plead guilty in connection to the death of Friends star Matthew Perry. 54-year-old Mark Chavez agreed to plead guilty to one count of conspiracy to distribute ketamine. As part of the deal, Chavez admitted to taking prescription drugs from his former employer and conspiring with another doctor to supply Perry with drugs. If convicted, Chavez could face up to 10 years in prison. A Texas man became the 6th inmate to be executed in the U.S. in the last 11 days. Garcia Glenn White was put to death by lethal injection yesterday for the murder of twin 16-year-old girls 35 years ago. Shortly before he was executed, White apologized. Authorities said he was also tied to the deaths of a grocery store owner and another woman. And CBS News exclusively captured video of former President Jimmy Carter and his family marking his 100th birthday yesterday. They watched as 4 military jets flew over his hometown of Plains, Georgia. Carter is the first American president to live a full century. He's been in hospice for the past 19 months and keeps defying expectations. He said his goal is to make it to Election Day so that he can vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. All right, we're continuing to follow developments out of the Middle East this morning after Iran launched a massive missile attack against Israel last night. In a move, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan described as a significant escalation. We want to dig into it with CBS News reporter Olivia Gazis, who's joining me now from the State Department in Washington to discuss. So, Olivia, I guess the first question that everybody is going to want to know is, what more do we know about the U.S. involvement in thwarting this attack by Iran? We know that in past instances where Iran has launched missiles against Israel, that the United States, with its warships, has been able to intercept some of those missiles. Was that the case this time around?
That's right, yes. Pentagon officials yesterday confirmed that the U.S. was involved in assisting Israel with its missile defenses. And the State Department also alluded to some unnamed partners who were also engaged. They did not name those partners, partially out of sensitivity, because while the U.S. was able to build a sort of public-facing coalition the last time this happened in April, it's not clear if there was a smaller number of partners in the region who were enthusiastic about assisting the Israelis or were more reluctant to do so. I mean, the situation is still littered with a lot of unknown unknowns at this stage, both about the Israeli response and whether the U.S. will assist meaningfully in it. It's assumed something will happen. The question is what is targeted and whether that leads to another tit-for-tat scenario between the Israelis and the Iranians. In April, the Israelis, we believe, responded covertly, and it sort of ended there. Now it's unclear whether they're feeling emboldened by this slate of successes they have had of late, decapitating significant levels of Hezbollah leadership, mopping up operations in Gaza, and of course successfully defending against this onslaught of Iranian missiles. So there are questions surrounding the Israeli mindset, whether they want to go in and deal a decisive blow somewhere or whether they pull back and opt for more diplomatic solutions as the U.S. has pressed for in the past.
So let's talk about that, those diplomatic solutions. Olivia, you're obviously at the State Department, where the number one goal is diplomacy. That is the job of the chief diplomat, Antony Blinken. I suspect that most people think that because Iran is an adversary of the United States, that there are no diplomatic channels open, but there have been diplomatic and diplomacy efforts in the past. And so I wonder what is happening sort of behind the scenes that we may not necessarily be privy to, that might not appear on the front pages of a newspaper, but that you and I can talk about.
Sure, Vlad. Yeah, because we are privy to those conversations. No, it is true that the U.S. does have discrete, select channels to pass messages to the Iranian government in critical situations such as the one that it was facing. However, yesterday there were some reports emerging citing anonymous Iranian officials that suggested the U.S. got a heads up ahead of this attack. The State Department spokesman here saying that was absolutely not the case. There was no advance notice. The Pentagon also echoing that assertion that there was absolutely no heads up via diplomatic or other channels from the Iranians that they intended to launch this missile attack on Israel. That information was more likely obtained by intelligence services both in Israel and here, who very closely monitor what the Iranians are doing with their weaponry. So the notion that there was diplomatic engagement in order to choreograph or stage or manage this attack seems unlikely. You heard the National Security Advisor calling this a significant escalation that was only ineffective and defeated because of close U.S. and Israeli coordination on defenses and, of course, also those partners that we mentioned earlier, Vlad.
All right, Olivia, always great to talk to you, my friend. Thank you very much. The focus of the Biden administration today is all about storm recovery. Vice President Harris will be in Georgia while President Biden is headed to North and South Carolina. Folks, Helene is now one of the most deadly storms to hit the continental United States. CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry is in Asheville, North Carolina. And earlier this week, Skylar, we saw the devastation. We can still see it behind you now. Where are we in the recovery efforts? What are folks telling you?
Yeah, we are in the River Arch District, which is here in Asheville. It's actually right above one of the rivers that saw those historic level of floodwaters, the French Broad River. All of it washed away. And this was the place where many of the artists here in town really found their livelihoods in terms of the galleries and custom pieces that they would put together for people all across the world. As for the recovery process, we have heard from people all throughout the post-Helene aftermath, if you will. They say that they are without water, they are without food, they are without power and other medical supplies. We actually ran into a gentleman who was using his own plastic gallons to fill up from the river just so that he had the ability to flush the toilets and use it for additional plumbing needs. People that we also spoke with say that they have heard different things as it relates to trying to get their water back up and running, 4 to 6 weeks. Power, officials say that it may take several days before there is a significant jump in terms of the people getting access to said power. As of right now, at least here in Buncombe County, about 97,000 people still do not have power. And as it relates to supplies, we've seen really neighbors helping neighbors. We were in a community just yesterday where folks were just sharing what they have in terms of stuff that was in their refrigerator because they did not want that food to go bad, obviously with no power. And so they were out there grilling and doing everything that they can. And it really is just trying to share as many resources as possible because everyone realizes how dire the situation is right now.
We asked about what folks are telling you about what they've gone through over the last couple of days, Skylar. What are they saying about what they want to hear from President Biden today?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's just about getting resources here, Vlad. Actually, maybe 5 minutes ago, a woman that we spoke with talked about just how emotional she was in terms of just seeing so many different law enforcement agencies, state officials coming into the Asheville area to help out where they can. We spoke with a gentleman from the Cajun Navy who was on his way to go help someone get out of their property. And that is more so of what these folks say that they want to hear from not only President Biden, from the governor here, Roy Cooper, and other top officials, is just send the cavalry in, continue to send those resources. They realize that this process will be a slow one, especially in some of the more harder to reach communities. But they say that they need as much help as they possibly can. And that's not with those essential items that I was talking about, but that's medical supplies, that's gasoline, just to get from one point to the other that we've seen so many people struggle with in terms of access. And so I think the more supplies, the more demand, as it were. The federal response certainly has to ramp up in terms of what people are saying, but they say that they realize everything is going to take a bit of time in order for all of that to recover.
All right. We're hoping that they are able to get that recovery that they sorely need. Skylar, thank you very much. You've been doing some incredible reporting on the ground over the last couple of days, and we appreciate it. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Grant.
Good morning, Vlad. Good morning to you guys at home. I want to start off by just showing you some of the flood warnings there from the residual floodwaters across portions of the southeast this morning. Now, obviously, all that rain was coming there from western North Carolina, upstate South Carolina, and still those floodwaters are rushing downriver. But the good news, though, is that our rivers are beginning to crest, at least in some places. You get into the low country of South Carolina, that crest may not come until Friday into Saturday, but those flood warnings are getting farther away from the mountains. and then continuing to wash and then run off into the Atlantic Ocean. Let's take that off and let's head west, okay? Because while on the East Coast they're getting improving weather, the Southwest is dealing with some serious heat. Look at some of these temperatures here. These are forecast highs across portions of the desert Southwest. Even places like Denver could see record high temperatures today, but places like Las Vegas, Los Angeles, they're in triple-digit territory. Phoenix at 107 degrees today. Let me show you these forecasts, all right? So these are where we could see some of those record high temperatures across the Southwest today into portions of California. 105 in Phoenix, the record's 107. Vegas, 103, records 100. San Jose, California, 103. You get the idea, man. It is hot out there, and we're into October now. 39.4 million people underneath some sort of heat alert today. The heat continues for the rest of the week, Vlad. But here's the thing. Phoenix continues with this triple-digit heat. They took a little break in September for about 5 or 6 days, but this stretch of triple-digit heat continues for Phoenix. Back to you for now, Vlad.
Wish we get some of that heat here. It's already starting to get a little chilly here on the East Coast, Grant. I love me some summer. Yeah, man, bring back summer. I'm here for it. All right, we'll check in with you a little bit later.
It's
Thanks,
all
dude.
out west.
Okay. I might be moving then. All right, let's talk about the VP candidates who made their cases to voters last night. But did their running mates approve of their debate performances? We're going to check in with both the Trump and Harris campaigns next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. CBS News polling shows both vice presidential candidates got a boost in favorability among those who watched last night's debate, and we're hearing from both the Harris and Trump campaigns who are weighing in on how their respective running mates perform. So let's bring in CBS News campaign reporters Aaron Navarro and Zach Hudak for more on the reaction to the debate from those at the top of the ticket. So Aaron, let me begin with you. How's the Harris campaign feeling about Governor Walz's performance last night?
Glad good to be with you. Unsurprisingly, they felt that he did a good job in terms of highlighting the contrast on key Democratic issues, women's reproductive rights, and the threats to democracy angle that they have been painting Trump and Vance with, especially that answer at the end where Walz asked Vance if he believed Trump lost the 2020 election. Vance didn't give a clear yes or no. The Harris campaign has already cut that into an ad. But from talking to Democratic operatives, not affiliated with the campaign, but were watching last night, they did believe Walz had a shaky start in that first answer about foreign policy, but felt that he got more comfortable as the debate kept going. But in the grand scheme of things, they're not predicting it to cause any big shifts in the electorate.
Let me ask you quickly, Aaron, about what Governor Walz said about Tiananmen Square and being in Beijing in 1989. How do you address that? And could that be a problem for him? Because it was surprising to me that, I don't know, the way he responded to it was almost as if he hadn't prepared to respond to it. And he probably should have been.
But he seemed a little bit caught off guard with that answer, saying that he was a knucklehead and he misspoke. He had similar answers when questions about his military record when he first jumped into this race were coming up. That was something people watching the debate last night, operatives said they were surprised he wasn't a bit more prepped for that answer. They argued, the Democratic operatives I talked to, that it won't matter much in the grand scheme of things, but we are expecting Walz to do more travel and do more interviews, the campaign says, in the next couple of weeks, where he will likely be asked again about that Tiananmen Square incident.
Yeah, and I know from people who are Democrats and activists that in their minds, folks who are supporting the Harris-Walz ticket, that, look, when they compare to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, they say those are minor quibbles in somebody's track record. So let's talk about the Trump campaign, Zach. How is the former president responding to J.D. Vance's performance in the debate last night? I only ask because, or I only chuckle because, as we all know, Trump loves live tweeting events and loves live tweeting campaign events, including debates, and he was doing that last night on Truth Social.
Vlad, that's exactly right. And we saw repeatedly the former president take aim at Governor Walz 4 times that he misspoke and things like that. The Trump campaign is acting like they are very happy with Senator Vance's performance last night. We expected him to be very aggressive, and at times he was. But I think what was notable was that there were actually a few wholesome moments between them. For instance, when he apologized to Governor Walz and said, "I'm sorry that your son had to go through witnessing a shooting recently. I didn't know that." And those are a few moments that, if you compare the way that J.D. Vance was debating when he was running for the Senate, he had a much more aggressive, sometimes a little bit bully-like debate persona. He's very skilled as a debater, but he did not have wholesome moments like that. So that was something that was surprising and that I think we're going to see resonate among those swing voters in battleground states who really want to see us get back to civility in politics. So that moment and others really stood out to me.
Yeah, I wonder how the former president will take to that, because as we know, he hates apologizing. He hates ever appearing in what would, in his mind, be a moment of weakness by just being a gentleman in an environment like the one we witnessed yesterday. You even saw that moment towards the end, guys, where their respective wives came up on stage. They chatted on the stage, all four of them. They came over to Nora and to Margaret to shake their hands. It was something we hadn't seen probably in like 8 years. So I thought that was kind of cool. But let me ask you one last question, Zach, about the interview that former President Trump was set to conduct with 60 Minutes. He's now canceled that. We know that he keeps saying he's not going to debate Vice President Harris again. So she's going to carry on with that 60 Minutes interview. And again, the question becomes, for the Trump camp, do they really want the last debate to be the last word? In other words, by all accounts, getting trounced by the vice president. And also now she gets a national platform to talk about her policies just a few weeks before the election.
Vlad, I think the way they see it is that he has a tremendous social media following and he's able to speak directly to his base when he wants to. So I think in a lot of ways, they're not that concerned about it. They know that he's going to hold these large rallies, that they're going to be available to watch online, and that the people who want to hear him speak have an opportunity to if they want to.
All right, Aaron and Zach, thank you guys. Appreciate it. New discovery on Pluto's biggest moon. Did you know that Pluto had a moon? Well, it does. What scientists hope it can divulge about our solar system. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Astronomers say new discoveries on Pluto's biggest moon could help them figure out how that moon and many other icy bodies in the solar system are born. They say the James Webb Space Telescope helped them detect carbon dioxide and hydrogen peroxide on the frozen moon's surface. Scientists believe this could eventually shed light on the beginnings of our solar system. So what are we saying? That there are 6 moons now of Pluto? Because there were 5, right? Cneberos, Charon, Nix, Hydra, and Styx. Wow. Not the band. Come sail away. No, Styx, the moon. But then it was downgraded. Interplanet Janet from Schoolhouse Rock told me it was a planet, and it's not a planet. I have no idea. Let's bring in CBS News. It is a planet? It's a dwarf planet now. Interplanet Janet, she's a galaxy girl, Grant. You're too young to know what I'm talking about. But there will be people watching who know Schoolhouse Rock.
I am.
He's like, I am, bro.
Well, I know Schoolhouse Rock, yeah, but like, I don't think I did not commit it to memory that well. You paid much better attention in school than I did, I think.
Oh, I learned everything about science, about math, about grammar, and history. It was all Schoolhouse Rock.
It worked. It worked. It worked, and that's the key.
What do you got, man?
Vlad, let me tell you real quick here. I want to pass this along to everybody. We actually had a new tropical depression just develop in the Atlantic. I know there's been a lot of focus on this, but this Tropical Depression 13 stays out in the Atlantic. It is forecast to become a hurricane, though. Again, it will follow right behind what is now Hurricane Kirk. Meanwhile, watching the Gulf of Mexico for some potential development. Regardless of development, that could bring some rain showers to portions of the Gulf states. Around the rest of the country, very warm out west. Record heat out in California and portions of Phoenix. Meanwhile, improving weather here along the East Coast. Vlad, I got to go back and watch some of those old clips of Schoolhouse Rock.
Interplanet Janet, brother. Check it out. An encore of CBS Mornings. Coming up next, this is CBS News 24/7.